Hi, I'm Linda. I want to tell you about my son David, my pride, my heart, and my reason for holding on through some of the hardest days of my life. David grew up in a small town in Texas, you know the kind, where everybody waves hello and the neighbors check on each other. It's a quiet place, with wide open skies and long summer evenings that stretch on forever. From the moment David was born, I knew he was special. Not because he was perfect, he wasn't, but because he had this light inside him, a kindness that just couldn't be taught. Even as a toddler, he would stop to help anyone who looked sad or hurt. One of my favorite memories is when he was about 5. It was a summer afternoon, and we were sitting on the back porch. David suddenly jumped up and ran inside, coming back out with a handful of ants and a little leaf he said was their boat. He carefully placed the ants on the leaf, watching to see if they'd float across the water puddle in our yard. I smiled and told him, "You have a big heart, David." He looked up at me with those bright eyes and said, "I just want to help people, Mama." And that little boy, that kind-hearted boy, grew up to be a man who wanted to serve something bigger than himself. When David told me he wanted to join the military, I remember the exact moment like it was yesterday. We were sitting in the kitchen, just the two of us, the late afternoon sun casting warm light through the window. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest before he even spoke. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Mama, I want to serve. I want to protect people. I want to make you proud." I swallowed hard. My mind flooded with all the things I wanted to say: "Stay safe, don't go, please reconsider." But none of those words came out. Instead, I said what I felt deep down inside: "I'm proud of you, David." That night, we talked for hours. He shared his dreams and his fears, and I shared mine. We made a promise to each other: no matter what happened, we'd stay strong and hold on to hope. David was always a dreamer, but also so practical. He worked hard in school, helped out around the house, and treated everyone with respect. I remember how he loved baseball. I was at every game, cheering louder than anyone else, even if the team was losing. He wasn't the star player, but he had heart. I used to tell him, "It's not about winning, it's about playing with all you've got." And that's exactly what he did, on the field and later in his life. There were plenty of times when he came home from practice covered in dirt and bruises, but he never complained. Instead, he'd flash that smile that could light up a room and say, "I'm okay, Mama." Those memories carried me through the days when I didn't know what to hope for. When the letters started coming from boot camp, they became my lifeline. The first letter was shaky and short, the handwriting not quite steady, but the words carried so much determination. David wrote about the early mornings, the tough drills, and the friendships forming between the soldiers. Every time I read those letters, it was like he was right there with me, telling me he was okay. Some days, the letters stopped for a while, and those days were the hardest. The silence would creep in and fill the house with worry. But I found strength in my faith, my friends, and in the other military moms who understood exactly what I was feeling. Every morning, I lit a candle by the window and whispered a prayer for David's safety. Even in the darkest moments, I held on to hope, because hope was all I had. After David left for boot camp, the house felt emptier than I ever imagined it could. The silence was heavy, the kind of silence that makes your heart ache because it's missing something so precious. I kept his room just the way he left it, baseball posters on the wall, his favorite hoodie folded neatly on the chair. Every morning, I'd go to the mailbox hoping for a letter, and every night, I'd reread whatever letter I had, clinging to his words like they were lifelines. Boot camp was no joke. David told me in his letters about waking up before dawn, the endless drills, the sweat and exhaustion that pushed him to his limits. He wrote about the yelling drill sergeants, the strict discipline, and how he was learning to be part of a team, a brotherhood of soldiers who depended on each other to survive and succeed. I could almost hear his voice in those letters, tired but proud. One letter, he wrote about a moment when everything felt too hard, when he wanted to give up. But then he remembered why he was there. He remembered me, he remembered home, and he pushed through. I was so proud. And yet, my worry never left. Sometimes, weeks would go by without a word. I'd call the base, but they wouldn't give me much information. Those days were the hardest, when the silence was louder than any letter. I leaned on my church community, on the other military moms who knew this pain too well. We'd meet for coffee, sharing stories and tears, praying together for the safe return of our children. I found comfort in those moments, in knowing I wasn't alone. Sometimes, I'd sit by the window late at night, holding one of David's letters, reading it until the words blurred. I remember one letter where he described the small acts of kindness among the soldiers, sharing a meal, lending a jacket, helping each other through the tough days. Those moments reminded me that even in hard times, humanity shines through. It gave me hope. David wasn't just training to be a soldier. He was becoming part of something bigger, a family forged in fire and trust. And though I missed him every day, I knew he was growing stronger, braver, ready for whatever came next. Sometimes, I'd close my eyes and imagine David's mornings, the cold air biting at his face, the sound of boots on gravel, the camaraderie of voices rallying him forward. I pictured him pushing through fatigue, focusing on the mission, holding on to the dream of coming home. And that's what kept me going, the dream of that day. When David left for deployment overseas, it felt like a piece of me went with him. That day at the airport. I still remember it like it was yesterday. The air was thick with emotion, families hugging, soldiers standing tall, and the hum of airplanes in the background. I held David's hand as tightly as I could. I wanted to memorize every detail, the warmth of his grip, the way his eyes searched mine for reassurance. "Be safe," I whispered. "Come back to me," I said softly, almost like a prayer. And then, he was gone, stepping onto the plane, leaving behind everything familiar, stepping into the unknown. The days that followed were some of the hardest I've ever lived through. I woke up each morning hoping for news, checking the mailbox, refreshing my phone, any message, any sign that he was okay. The waiting was endless. The fear was constant. I tried to stay busy, volunteering at the community center, helping other families, going to church, but the worry was always there, in the back of my mind. Every time the news mentioned conflict zones, my heart would race. I remember one evening, sitting alone by the window, staring out at the dark sky. I whispered a prayer, asking God to watch over David, to keep him safe from harm. And in those quiet moments, I found a strange kind of peace. Peace in knowing that my prayers might be heard. Peace in knowing that I wasn't alone, that so many other mothers were praying too. Letters from David were my lifeline. He wrote about the heat, the dust, the long days and sleepless nights. He wrote about missing home, missing me, and about the friends he'd made, the brotherhood he'd found. He told me about small moments of joy, a shared joke, a beautiful sunset, a letter from a stranger thanking them for their service. Those letters gave me hope. But there were also days when the silence stretched on too long. Days when I feared the worst. And those days, I had to hold on tight, to hope, to faith, to love. I learned that waiting was an act of courage. That hope was a form of strength. And that a mother's love could reach across any distance, even the farthest oceans and the darkest nights. I surrounded myself with friends and family. I leaned on my church and community. I found comfort in sharing my fears and my faith with others who understood. Every night, I lit a candle and whispered a prayer for David, for his safety, for his courage, for his heart. That's the story of waiting. Waiting and praying, hoping and loving, until the day you can hold your child again. David's letters became my lifeline during those long months apart. I kept every single one, carefully folded, some worn at the edges from being read again and again. His handwriting changed over time, steady and confident now, a reflection of the man he was becoming. Each letter told a story, about his days, his thoughts, his hopes. He wrote about the small things, sharing a meal with his unit, the way the sun set over the distant hills, the sound of laughter that reminded him of home. Those little details made the miles between us feel just a bit smaller. One letter I'll never forget was about a day when things got really tough. David described how he and his friends had been caught in a sudden storm, rain pouring down, thunder crashing overhead. But even in the storm, they looked out for each other, sharing dry clothes, helping one another through the mud. He said it reminded him of the strength they had as a unit, a family forged in hardship. Reading that letter, I felt like I was right there with him, sharing in that moment of resilience and hope. Sometimes, when the loneliness hit me hardest, I'd pull out those letters and read them over and over. They were like little pieces of David, sent across the miles, wrapped in love and courage. But the letters also reminded me of how much I missed him, the sound of his voice, the way he laughed, the way he always knew how to make me smile. I found myself thinking back to his childhood, to the days when he was just a boy with big dreams. I remembered the nights when he'd crawl into my lap, tired from a day of playing outside. I remembered his first steps, his first words, his first baseball game. Those memories were my sanctuary. They kept me grounded when the waiting felt overwhelming. And they reminded me why I was holding on, why I believed he would come home safe. Being a mother means carrying both joy and fear in your heart. It means loving with every fiber of your being, even when the world feels uncertain. And it means finding strength in the memories that no one can take away. When David finally came home, it was a day filled with so many emotions: relief, joy, and a quiet sadness I didn't expect. I remember standing at the airport, my heart pounding, tears in my eyes as I saw him walk through those doors. He was the same boy I raised, but also different, shaped by what he'd been through, carrying invisible wounds that no one could see at first glance. The days after his return were a mix of happiness and struggle. David had nightmares. Sometimes he'd wake up screaming, and I'd hold him close, whispering that he was safe now. There were moments of silence, where I could see the weight he carried but didn't want to talk about. I realized then that coming home didn't mean everything was okay. Healing was going to take time, for him and for all of us. We started going to therapy together, learning how to talk about the things that were hard to say. I learned how to be patient, how to listen without trying to fix everything right away. I learned that love sometimes means just being there, steady and strong, even when you don't have all the answers. Our journey wasn't easy, but it was full of hope. David's courage didn't end on the battlefield. It continued in the way he faced each day, the way he fought to find peace inside himself. And I stood by him, every step of the way. Because that's what a mother does. Through the pain and the healing, our bond grew even stronger. We found new ways to connect, through quiet moments, shared stories, and the simple act of being together. I am so proud of the man David is today, a man who faced the darkest storms and came home to shine his light. To every mother listening, every mother who's waiting, praying, hoping for her child's safe return, I see you. I know the weight you carry, the quiet strength it takes to hold on when the days feel long and the nights even longer. Being a mother means loving without limits. It means trusting even when the path is uncertain. And it means believing in hope, even when hope feels fragile. My story is just one of many. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: love is the strongest force we have. It can cross oceans, it can bridge distances, and it can light the darkest nights. So hold on to that love. Hold on to your faith. And know that you are never alone. Thank you for listening to my story. May your heart find peace, and may your loved ones come home safe.